Welcome back. I'm Susan Lindner, your host of the Innovation Storytellers Show. Today, I'm going to ask you to get a little bit uncomfortable with me. If it is said many times that if you are not uncomfortable, you are not pushing yourself, you are not stepping out of your comfort zone. And as a result, you're not growing, you're not changing, you're not stepping into the full-fledged innovator that you could be. And that's why I'm really excited for my guest today, who's written a whole book about it to help us embrace discomfort and take ourselves to the next level, especially in a corporate setting. So let's talk about it. My guest today is Anthony Reeves, who has spent the last 20 years focusing on one thing: how brands stay themselves distinctly in systems designed to make them the same. At LVMH, he led brand and marketing for its startup house, scaling acquired brands to compete alongside the world's luxury names without losing what made them valuable. At Amazon, he ran the internal creative agency during a period of hypergrowth, leading Super Bowl campaigns and setting the standards that shaped how brands show up on the platform. And at WPP, he worked across giant global clients, including Nike and Airbnb, helping scale media investment and redefine brand presence. As a global head of brand and creative at Kohler, he led a 150-year-old American brand through different kind of transformation, refusing to use AI-generated people in advertising and rethinking how products are experienced across digital commerce. Reeves is a three-time Cannes Lion keynote speaker, Campaign of the Year winner, and the first male recipient of the 3% Conference Award. He is the author of Eat the Donkey: Why Great Companies Embrace Discomfort. Anthony, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, Susan, thank you very much. That's a big intro. I appreciate that.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a moment. Can I just take us a little bit through your own personal journey? I had the good fortune of reading your book, which I absolutely adored. Highly recommend. We're going to include all about the book in the show notes. But you started off with a life that a lot of people would consider uncomfortable compared to cushy suburban life or cushy urban life that many of us have experienced. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Yeah, thank you. So, in one way, it's kind of awkward to talk about, but I grew up in the Australian outback where every decision you made was about progress and about moving forward. And whether it was where do you set up camp for the night, or how do you eat that day, or how far away, or how many of a kilometer the next gas station or petrol station is, was all about how we grew up. And, there's so many great stories that I remember or have been told, whether it's through the First Nation people or through my parents. And growing up in the outback was I was unexpected, and I actually believe it was very unexpected, and I don't think I appreciated it probably till I hit about 45 years old. And then I realized what it gave me rather than what it took away. And it gave me a lot about progress and just learning to move forward and realizing that as a species, as humans, we are about progress, we are stepping forward, and we are used to being very, very uncomfortable. We just kind of forget it every now and then.
Just even in the introduction to your book, Anthony, I'm so startled by the writing. And you say, "This is where I learned the comfort of being uncomfortable. This beautiful nothingness is where I learned everything that matters about exploration and suffering. Purposeful boredom and long-term discomfort teach you things that comfort and constant stimulation never could. This is where I learned to let my mind wander and be free." And how many of us, almost we're begging for a moment of boredom. We're begging for a moment of less stimulation. But I think you just encapsulated so well what it feels like as a little kid to, blow hot air on a cold window and start writing your name in the window, right? Those moments I feel like our kids today are missing, but also our executives aren't taking the time to do that, to free the mind, and as innovators to really allow creativity to enter, and it enters from those stretches of boredom, the lack of stimulation.
It does. I can remember, staring out the window as like miles and miles of desert disappear. Today, I have to be very purposeful about it and truly think about how to create that moment. And, fortunately, like I do love to fly and I love to travel, but I do not get the Wi-Fi on board a plane. And whether the
Ooh,
flight is 90 minutes or 9 hours, I purposely don't do it. And it allows for the mind to take over or to pick up a book and read or just stare and do nothing. And this is probably a little bit too much. And I was actually chatting to a colleague about it the other month, was the only time that I'm likely to shed a tear is on a plane. And it's because I've let the mind wander a little bit. And even walking the dog, I'll tell my wife I'm leaving, I'll be back in an hour. I'm not going to take my phone and just go. And it's great.
yeah. So in your book, you talk about explorer and static states. Can you talk a little bit about that and why both of those explorer and static states matter?
The explorer state to me is, and the static and the explorer, but the explorer state to me is when you're investigating and when you're growing and when you're changing. And you can't be constantly on the move and constantly moving forward. And I find that you're at an explorer state more when you have the ability to think and relax and develop and grow. You become static when you're bogged down and doing the grind or grinding the work out. I do find it very interesting that Warren Buffett only has one or two meetings a week.
Mm,
And it is staggering. And
wow. I didn't
that's
know that.
it's staggering that someone of that ilk and those smarts have has lets their mind just wander and explore. And as innovators or creative people, there was times when my calendar started at 7:30 in the morning and was booked all the way out to 6. And it was like, I'm not doing any work. I'm not thinking. And it's
Mm.
my brain that I'm doing. And it's kind of like we've forgotten the ability of letting ourselves wander and explore. We're so busy on the static of today that there's no exploration going on.
Talk to us a little bit about some of the innovation that you've worked on, Anthony. You've worked with some of the biggest brands, from luxury brands to CPG brands, right? To everyday putting on, lacing up our Nikes and getting on board. Tell us about some of the innovations that you've worked on and the stories that have accompanied them. I love the ones that you raise in the book, like, the discussion about Jaguar and Porsche, right? And the desire for optimization as part of their innovation program, right? Tell us about some of the brands that you've worked with and the stories that have gone along with that innovation.
Yeah, with LVMH, there's one great story in there that I do want to chat about. There's a brand from Australia, so like I've got to sell the home country. Is they're called Two Times You, and they recently were sold off out of LVMH a year or two ago, and it's 2XU, and there was three founders for the brand. Aiden, Jamie, and Clyde. And Jamie was a world-class triathlete, and that's where the brand really started at its core. And they had began to fade away from the brand of the brand's core. And the main innovation we did was how do we keep pulling it back to what is really, really about endurance sports and what it does really well. And the innovation we found was not so much about the material or how well it wore or what does it do for your muscle during recovery, etc. It was about finding out where this product truly sat in the world of an athlete and how it
Mhm.
sat there in the mindset. And from the brand point of view, we realized that 90 to 95% of an athlete's performance is actually in the training field. And we wanted to sit in that world only and not actually get onto the pitch or onto the field or onto the court or something like that. And it was very much about the innovation was more about how do we hold true to who we really are and what we really do. And it's so easy to be pulled away and chase the latest revenue dollar or chase the latest margin. And when you look at brands that have pulled away, like a Jaguar, they've forgotten who they are, and they made the really easy discussion about let's go electric, let's make our logo look electric, let's make ourselves look modern. At the end of the day, though, they were forgetting what they really were as a vehicle. They started Swallow sidecar. They've always been about like British sort of sporting heritage. And the job of a good marketer is to look at revenue opportunities, of course, and build a brand, but also say no more often. And it's really
Mm.
hard to say no. And it's easy to chase short-term money. And Jaguar was looking at a short-term opportunity rather than the long-term feeling of the brand. And whether it's an LVMH brand or a Jaguar, is like, how do you stay true to who you are and innovate within that space?
Where do you think they screwed up the story around Jaguar? You know, what they were trying to communicate to us. And I kept thinking about all of those people who have bought generational Jaguars. You know, like there was something about seeing a green Jaguar to me with the Jaguar leaping off the front and the brown leather interior. It was so aspirational for me. I love everything green, but it was the first time I'd seen a green car and go, it's perfect.
Beautiful.
It's
It is.
perfect. Like it was like a work of art. And I kept thinking about all the people who had bought Jaguar before who must have felt so betrayed by their brand shift.
Indeed. So Jaguar, is the British racing green is such a beautiful, deep, deep green.
Is that what it's called?
It is British racing green, yeah. It's like a really emeraldy kind of color.
Hmm.
It's just got feels like it's got layers upon layers. Where Jaguar went wrong is like I do believe there's going to be a world where electric comes in or alternative fuels come in, and we're really inventing inside what they are and who they are as a company. They forgot what they stood for originally, where they were, and I do believe that they could have created a new engine or they could have gone electric. But maintain the same logo. The Leaping Jaguar has always been the same. That could have remained 100% the same.
Hmm.
And putting in a different type of engine or a different type of fuel was perfectly okay. But changing the ethos of what they stood for originally, which is that sporting heritage and that richness of being very British, is something they could have held on to, but they gave up that. One of
Hmm.
the I'm trying to think of a really good example where a company did move forward but stayed true to who they are. And I know Burberry did that as well. They moved forward, but they kept their very Britishness to them. The other one that I do admire that they've done a lot of great work, that they have progressed, but they've stayed true to who they are is actually Southwest Airlines.
Hmm.
Now, I am not a Southwest flyer. Like I like a little bit of control in my life. And
I'm just on the
um,
East Coast. It's like
Mhm.
not really available for me, but yeah.
Southwest are absolutely staggering as an airline. Outside of the pandemic, they've been profitable for 47 years. And for an airline business, that's truly amazing. They're really great at the A to B and a bag of peanuts. They're phenomenal at that. And the
Mhm.
simplicity is great. Generally speaking, they have one aircraft, which is a Boeing 737. And so everything is very step and repeat. But they've invented in that low cost airline flight. And yes, they charge you for baggage and everything like that, but they're brilliant at that simplicity and they've invented in that space time and time and time again. But they've stayed true to who they are, which is we're going to get you from A to B at a low cost. You're going to have to suffer a little bit. You have to line up from one to section eight or whatever it is. That's okay. We're going to get you down to Disney World or get to Orlando or to a theme park, and we're going to do it really well. And they've done that phenomenally well, but they stayed true to who they are and kept reinventing inside that space.
Yeah. So it's a challenge for every brand owner, right? To figure out how do I keep reinventing myself while keeping my roots intact.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. I was thinking about Nike this morning, and their market cap has dropped 64% in
oh, I didn't
2020.
realize it was so dramatic.
It
Wow.
is, yeah, it's 287 to give or take 100 billion. And it is remarkable where they went wrong and how they tried to create technology and make technology the savior and forget about who they were as a company in the first place.
It was funny. I was watching a movie with Denzel Washington and Spike Lee last night called Highest to Lowest on Apple. And his two kids are going to basketball camp and they're dribbling the ball, and the coach says, "Be like Mike." And his son says, "Mike who?" And I thought,
Wow.
wow, are we at that generation now where there is a generation of kids who are going, "Mike who?" And then, your point about Nike's market cap, that was written into the script, right? About what Gen X knows about Nike's own history, I'm thinking,
Wow.
right? And how
That's
do you keep
scary.
reinventing when you have very formidable culture, people in the culture are portraying their own kids and grandkids as going, "Mike who?"
Like who? That's kind of sad in a way.
Yeah, because they're LeBron kids, they're Kobe kids, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a whole different generation, and Michael
Yeah.
Jordan seems like somebody's grandfather.
Wow. I never realized that. And even just the image of Jumpman and the Jordan shoe line is by far one of the most profitable lines that Nike ever put out.
Yeah. And my friends are still collecting.
Are
I
they
have friends
really?
that have whole shoe rooms of Jordans that they still
Wow.
collect and trade. So, but getting back to this part about discomfort, right? I mean, we're talking about a lot of discomfort as Nike's looking at a declining market cap, as its newly up and coming customer base is going, "Mike who?" Talk to us a little bit more about, from your book, the pieces around discomfort that corporate innovators are facing today, should be thinking about today. How do we, number one, put our teams into a state of discomfort if they're not already there from the onslaught of AI, right? And all the machinations and changes that happen there. And then how do we produce amazing work in the discomfort?
So I want to make sure that super clear on the fact that there's the organizational discomfort of how teams think and how they progress, and there's discomfort of associates or team members. And I'm not putting any word out there that we should make our team members feel very uncomfortable. We
It's an
should make
HR issue.
yeah, the HR side of it. So the uncomfort to me is we need to help people explore and go into territories where that's new and talk with them about when you do feel uncomfortable, there's uncomfortable that hurts you, and you don't want to go into that space, and you do want to, yeah, I mean, physically hurt you or mentally hurt you, but you do want to understand that when you do explore, you go down, am I uncomfortable because this is something new and it's a new territory that I haven't explored before, or is it I just don't feel personally safe in this environment, and there's the two are in between. And pushing that extra step, going to a different room or going to a different office is tiny, tiny things you can do. And
Mm.
HR always talks about one of the best ways to, get people to open up during a one-on-one is like go for a walk. And you go for a walk around an office or through a park, and it changes the landscape, and so conversations happen in a different way. And for the office, it's very much the same. If you change the landscape of an office or how you're sitting or what you're doing, it's a little thing, but you're making yourself feel that little bit uncomfortable. And mixing different teams up or different processes up is a really great way. Amazon is phenomenal at having a structure that keeps teams very uncomfortable and keeps them moving forward. And they always play the long game. Jeff always spoke about, get rich slowly. And you always play that super long game. And a lot of my history is, based on learnings from inside of Amazon. But the way they work is absolutely phenomenal. They don't believe in big vertical organizations. They believe in keeping things very, very flat. So the most junior person on the team can have a discussion with the most senior person on the team, and the project can be greenlit very, very quickly or killed off very quickly or invested in very quickly. And areas like that are great. And as a leader, when I've had large teams, I've always thought about like, how can I meet the smartest people who are probably the least experienced people, but they're more open to anything else? And that's creating that level of little bit of discomfort. Coming from Australia, like we all do love our sport, and we and I did a lot of sport growing up in the ultra endurance type area, and that is a very uncomfortable way to live. Like if you want to go out for a run in the morning, you're going out for 3 or 4 hours, and it hurts, but you're finding progress through that rhythm, and it's a really great way to grow and develop. And the learnings from endurance sport to work are very, very parallel.
It's it's interesting too, like that desire to kind of walk around, to do different, to see things differently. You talk in the book about how embracing average is really the death knell. And, I love what you said about how, McKinsey looked at this, right, and realized that AI could really have a negative impact on their business. And you mentioned in the book that McKinsey's own research says that the lifespans of the S&P 500, who found the average tenure dropped from 61 years on the S&P 500 in 1958 to just 18 years by 2012. And it's projected to shrink to 12 years by 2027. And you go on to say that these companies that failed they were not companies that failed spectacularly. They just performed adequately enough until being adequate was no longer enough. And I'm wondering, the practices that you mentioned, like of just going for a walk, of stepping into discomfort, of looking at things differently, that's a part of breaking away from adequate, from average too, right? It's the forced movement away from what we've always done and the way it's always been done.
You're right, and that McKinsey quote was written well before AI was even invented.
Right.
So it's creating this world, and I do believe in shaking things up and changing teams around. And even when I was leading like large creative teams, every 9 months we reshuffled the team, and
Mm.
it create we restacked is such a negative word, but we restacked the team. And what that meant was different people were working with different teams, and it created a world where they were always just a little bit restless. And it created an opening they hadn't seen before. And inside creative teams, you generally always partner like an art-based person with a writer-based person, and they create this really strong creative team. But if you shake that up every now and then and move things around, unexpected things happen. With AI, I am very concerned that companies are going to become exactly the same. They're going to become
Mm.
they know what perfect is, they know what great results are, they know how to get the response rate out of someone. And I was in a CMO conference earlier this year, and a lot of great marketers were actually from the movie Hollywood business, and there's people from IMAX and from NBCU, etc. And they were talking about what makes people go to the movies. And we're talking about Halloween and Fright movies. And they worked out that a movie that has a distressed woman's face gets more butts in seats at the theater than a happy, smiley person.
Wow.
And so every
Talk
horror
about
movie that
clickbait.
it is clickbait. So
Uh-huh.
every horror movie or every drama tension is going to have a very similar looking face. Putting actor talent or actress talent aside, that is going to be the same. So if we take that further and talk about a CPG company or automotive company, we know that happy family driving a car is going to get a higher click rate. So every automotive company is going to do exactly the same. Or is it a clean white shirt for detergent, or is it a dirty shirt for detergent? And you're going to
Mm.
know exactly the same. It's going to be the same. And it worries me that we're going to have these great brands that is going to become incredibly average because that's all they've stuck to over the years. And no one's fought to be very distinctive.
I'm remembering the first concert I ever saw. Well, I should ask you, Anthony, what's the first live rock concert you ever saw?
Wow. So the first true live rock concert, the biggest one was actually Cyndi Lauper.
Wow, that's a
I
great
know.
start.
I know. I'm embarrassed. Like I have seen AC/DC and In Excess in very small venues. Not AC/DC, In Excess were in a tiny pub venue when I saw them. But Cyndi Lauper was the one that really hit home.
Yeah, well, my first, like, I saw the Monkees, but that didn't really count with David Jones. But at my like local county fair. But the real first rock concert I saw as a college kid was REM.
Wow.
And it was the Green album. And you might recall, like, that's me in the corner, that's me in the spotlight, right? Losing my
Hmm.
religion, that song. But what was fascinating about that album, and I was not an REM fan, my friends dragged me to it, but prior to writing that album, they found themselves in a rut, and all of the members of the band decided to play each other's instruments or new instruments entirely. And it was their highest selling album at the time. The Peter Buck, who was the electric guitar player, he switched to the mandolin. And Mike Mills, who was the bass player, he started playing accordion and keyboards and piano. And their drummer took over the bass guitar duties. So it's that walking around the office and trying on something new isn't the exclusive domain of corporate life either. It's how great artists get unstuck from their traditional way of thinking. And I know that there's even research that says that they did a look at the hobbies of Nobel Prize winners. And the hobbies of Nobel Prize winners, the farther they were away from the thing that they worked on in the day to day, the more creative and more expansive their research became. And I just found that
Wow.
so fascinating to say, like, we're doing it wrong by saying, if you want to be in STEM, you got to focus on STEM and just stay in STEM and your life should be STEM, right? That's what we're telling our kids. When it's actually the exact opposite if you want to become a Nobel Prize winner.
My mind is blown about REM, and that's just great information. And the Nobel Prize side of it is do something totally different where you're opening up to the world. There's a great piece I read also talking about music about the Beatles and
Mm.
when they were creating Sergeant Pepper.
Wait,
Um,
Ringo who? Sorry, who's that?
no idea who Ringo is.
Who are
Yeah,
those Beatles?
the Beatles. Oh my God. Yeah, that would. Yeah, that generation wouldn't understand the impact that the Beatles had on the world. They were creating, all the crazy sounds they were doing with the Sergeant Pepper, and they were burning money in the studio. They were just like burning through it. And I heard a story that the producer basically became a bodyguard and kept people away from the studio and that, and forcibly was pushing people away and giving them room to do it. And I believe that in our corporate environment, we need people like that to keep people away. And I do the bodyguard side of it and protecting that environment is really key because innovative people and creative people generally aren't very good at protecting themselves that well. And we need to find systems and processes that help them sort of work through that. And I'm going to read more about REM and the Green Album to understand that more because that is just a phenomenal piece of information that I do believe that the corporate world could learn a lot from. And how do we take those little sparks of inspiration and make people a little bit uncomfortable? Like they're great musicians, but if I'm playing a mandolin versus a drum or something like that, like that's not a big change, but it's actually a huge change.
If you're a professional, right, and you've dedicated yourself to mastery, which I think
Hmm.
is what happens, and we talk about this a lot on the show, is and especially from a storytelling standpoint, when in the world of AI, we are asking people who have been masters of their domain to give up a sense of mastery and now go into kindergarten and say it's time to reevaluate everything that you've ever done, to put on the beginner's mind and say, we need you to look at this through an entirely new lens that you haven't conceived of before, and
Hmm.
believe that potentially this process could be done without people. This process could be done in a fraction of the time, at a fraction of the cost, with a fraction of the ego generating security that has led to your mastery,
Wow.
and ask people to remove that. And what that means is for people in the room, the level of cortisol and stress is incredibly high. So when we're rolling out strategy and we're asking leaders to conceive of new strategy, we're asking them to take their egos off and step into the world of the first grader. And I'm curious, this is a world of discomfort that most
Hmm.
leaders have never experienced before.
That's so true. On top of that, leaders have another duty, which is putting food on the table and shelter over the family's head. So they're putting themselves in probably this distressful situation that they're not used to, so they can be a provider. And there's talk about this recession coming in 2030, etc. And so the stress is probably almost double with what they're doing. And it's just, how do we help leaders sort of push the way forward and learn and grow? The other side of it, though, is I am worried about companies in 3 to 4 years' time when we haven't enabled thinking to happen with our interns or the newest employees, and I'm wondering whether there's going to be a gap in organizations where companies haven't invested in people and they haven't invested in talent and innovation. And when it comes to time to reinventing themselves or changing something new, or the pennies drop that the stock market share price isn't to where it should be, they've got nothing to fall back on. And we're in this really uncomfortable situation now where we have to use AI. We're being forced to use AI. The results aren't there yet by a long way. Like, I think only 42% of leaders have realized their AI dreams haven't come true. And we're seeing the money run out and the power and the energy run out. It's just going to be a very interesting time for the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. I mean, I remember there was a huge Twitter thread from a VP at Amazon who was responsible for not the firing of the full 16,000 people, but a large chunk of them, many of whom were responsible for designing some of the AI code themselves. They were asked to leave, only to find out that the AI was able to produce code at a speed that was remarkable, that far surpassed what humans can do. But the error rate jumped from 1.6% to something like 13%.
Wow.
And so suddenly, those same people who had been fired were now being asked to come back in and be minders. So rather than using their human intelligence to write code, which was now deemed obsolete, their core skills, and by the way, they were hired back at a higher salary, but only if they had taken an AI course or gotten some kind of certification in the interim.
Interesting. Interesting.
And so, and those folks were then responsible for correcting the AI that they themselves had often programmed and were becoming AI babysitters. What this executive was not allowed to talk about in his meeting was that there was an outage that was caused by these changes for 13 hours. It took 4 hours to find the outage and 9 hours to fix the outage. That cost $1.8 million for that time.
I'm
So
surprised it cost that little amount of money.
considering
Yeah.
well, clearly we didn't buy enough can openers that day, but
Yeah.
but just startling of what human intelligence is going to be worth in the AI economy, and how those shifts and transitions, as you're mentioning, right, are really going to be impacting the workforce. So when we're trying to bring creativity into this space that feels fraught, what do you think, Anthony, about what's the recommendation you give to people as you're exploring your creativity? You're looking at these explore and static states to get into the right mindset. How do they approach this thing that feels unknowable at the moment?
It's- one of the great things I enjoy about this conversation is I've learned things as we've gone through. Like I
Oh,
didn't know about REM and the outage of Amazon and how code is being used to as QA as opposed to actually writing the code.
mm,
And I would ask anyone to have a very similar mindset of how do you absorb what's going on? Because it's not the same. You're going to have to keep learning, you're going to have to keep growing, but how do you just keep that sort of sponge mentality and keep exploring about different ways of life? And that's the human side of who we are, and that's never going to change. And I believe that there are going to be times when AI is going to take away certain jobs. And I'm reading areas of medicine that's doing a better AI job. But there was something that appeared on NPR the other day that talked about weather and that AI is really, really good at predicting the weather norms, where it's going to be, it's going to be this temperature in June. Where AI really struggled in the temperature and the weather was the extreme cold, extreme heat, etc. And that's the explorer side of it. That's where change really happens. And AI is not going to be able to predict change, and AI is not going to be able to develop and be human and be realistic. And that's where we will always win. So I'm saying to people is like accept it. It's going to happen. You can't stop it, and the more you can learn, the better off you are about AI. But always keep the frailty and the explorer side of being human with us. And making mistakes is a phenomenal thing because AI generally is trying to be perfect, and we're not perfect by any means.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. AI has real difficulty interacting with people who are not neurotypical. It's questions and it's queries and prompts that come from people with autism, that come from people with who have other kinds of neurodivergence. AI is going, I'm not sure what you mean. I'm not sure what you're thinking. And so it itself is attuned to the average,
It
as
is.
you say in your book, right? And the closer we get to it, the more we don't want to get to mediocre, adequate, average, right? So it's the promotion of the most human traits of us that have to win, right?
It is. And I kind of believe we've been through this many times before, whether it was when the computer was invented or the wheel was invented and the Industrial Revolution happened. We've gone through these before, and we as a species have risen and become stronger and better. And so to me, it's a very interesting time, and it is very uncomfortable. I just You don't have a choice but to learn and to embrace it and just grab a certificate or learn more about what is going on within Claude or something like that will actually help your career more than anything else.
Yeah. Um, and then keep the humanity alongside of it, right?
Humanity.
That has to be the real co-pilot. AI isn't the co-pilot, our humanity is.
Yeah, and be the driver and bring that along. Be the tool. And we are chatting earlier about Nike, and this is a really great example how the market cap dropped of Nike and the CEO that was along that journey. Was probably a very phenomenal CEO, but he was brought in to make Nike a digital tech company, and probably very good at that. But Nike is not Nike at its core is a very a human type brand where you feel something, whether it's Michael Jordan or whether it's LeBron, but there is a feeling behind if you have a body, you're an athlete or just do it. And the tech and tools should layer on top of that. And
Yes.
when we're thinking about any job in the innovation world, is that the tech and tools are the co-pilot to what you're doing. You are still driving that forward. And Nike's just a great example where they kind of forgot that human side of it.
And that's a great tie into the Jaguar example too. They forgot about the driver.
They forgot about the driver. And they could have
Yeah,
changed the engine and they could have kept the emerald
that's
green and
right.
the jumping cat, and it would have just been the same.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So powerful, Anthony. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's now time for me to put you on the hot seat and ask
Uh-oh.
you the three questions that I ask everyone who comes on the show. So maybe more of a lukewarm seat. But what is the greatest innovation of all time?
Wow. The greatest innovation of all time is I don't think it's a computer or the wheel or anything like that. Is we can talk about plasma and all the great medical things that have been evolved, but I still believe that humanity is where we're going to end up. And I still believe that the power of belief, no matter whether you're talking about religion or just human belief, is by far the greatest feeling that and the greatest invention we'll ever have is when someone gives you a hug, physical or mental, is such a wonderful thing that will never go away.
Mm, that's right. No matter how many robots get invented in Japan,
Yep,
right,
exactly
that try
right.
to mimic humans
Exactly
and all
right.
that humans could do. Um,
Yes.
if you could join any innovation team in human history, which team would you have joined?
I enjoy solving really big, meaty problems that are more societal problems than anything else. And I would love to be a part of any team that's trying to rebuild an economy and think different about economies. So in a perfect world, there's no wars, but Ukraine or Iran for any reasons, like if I could be a part of a team that rebuilds Ukraine, I would love to be part of that. Like at first the people are wonderful, but also how do you help others rebuild who they are and where they came from originally.
Powerful, right? And that's what keeps the peace going after the conflict.
It is.
If we've learned nothing else from World War II, that certainly would
Exactly
have been
right.
it. And finally, what is the innovation the world needs now?
Wow. The biggest crisis I read about is food crisis and health. And putting aside the blocking of the strait in Iran at the moment, food is such a big commodity in life. And I think the invention we need now is get back to a state where we losing using less chemicals, but we're producing enough food for the world to exist on. So I think the invention has to be is how do we feed everybody and not just the wealthy people who can order what we need and get what we need.
Yes. And we have the capacity to do it. I'd love to call on the world's top 10 billionaires to maybe put the space plans on hold for a heartbeat. Maybe now try to get out of here and maybe help the folks who are already here.
Like we have people in the US who really struggle for food. And
Yes.
I don't understand that. I don't understand how it got to the point where we're not helping people that don't have health care. We're not helping people who struggle to put food on the table. There's some towns in the US or some city, not cities, but towns in the US where the best quality of food they can get is from McDonald's. And how
Wow.
is that possible? And
Right.
how do we solve that at that grassroots level? And unfortunately, and I've got a lot of great friends that have really helped me through this because I'm a newer American. The segregation in the US is still goes on, and we've got a huge part of our population that is really struggling. And whether it's health or food, we need to solve that and need to solve it in our backyard.
Amen. Said. Anthony Reeves, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
The simplest way is LinkedIn. I'm a very prevalent poster on LinkedIn, so you'll see me there, or just on my website, which is anthonyreeves.co.
Beautiful. And I'm going to ask all of my listeners to please check out Eat the Donkey: Why Great Companies Embrace Discomfort. It's a fantastic book, an easy read, and it will get you back into your creative brain again. Anthony, thank you so much.
This is wonderful. Thank you, Susan.